Hey everybody. One of the things I struggled with when I was first starting out as an editor was just finding out what a typical podcast editing workflow looked like. Not a basic editing 101 type thing that seems like every podcast service has. Something that just goes a little more in depth into how a professional podcast editor works. And when I was getting started, I noticed that there was a void in good quality, accurate information for podcast editors. A lot of it seemed to be really basic and didn't go in depth. Other stuff, there's a few channels out there that do a really good job of going into all of the details. But for a lot of people editing podcasts, that might be a little too in depth. Not everybody wants to be an audio engineer. So that was one of the things I noticed when I was trying to learn. And it's one of the reasons why I started Tansy Aster Academy. It started out as a course for podcast editors, but then I started realizing there's a big need to be able to ask questions, post your audio, get advice for the situation you're in at that moment in time. And a traditional course just doesn't offer that. So that's part of what I'm doing with Tansy Aster Academy, and what I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel is to help the people that want something a little more in depth, but without going into the realm of becoming an audio engineer. So in this video, we're going to just talk about what my basic workflow is. So let's dive in. The first thing I do is I download the files and put them in my chosen file and folder structure. That starts with the show, and then in that folder will be another folder with a unique identifier. Typically, this is an episode number. Sometimes it might be the guest or the title, depending on how I work with the show. And inside that folder will be typically 4 other folders. Raw audio, a DAW specific one. In my case, this would be a Hindenburg folder. That is where I store all of the DAW related session files. A renders folder, and an assets folder. The assets folder is where voiceover, specific episode intro outro files, anything that only gets used in this single episode will be in the assets. So the next thing I do is I take the raw audio and I put it into RX. Once in RX, my first step is I convert everything to 48 kilohertz sample rate if it's not already there. The reason for that is my system is set up to run at 48K. So that's just the first step, so that I'm not having to bounce back and forth between different sample rates. From there, I'll start to denoise each track in spectral denoise. And once I'm happy with the results of the denoising, I'll sample each track to see what other steps might need to be done in RX. So I'll make a list of what needs to be done. This is typically a mental list. And then I'll drop each file into RX's batch processor and run my standard batch, outputting the files into the same location that the originals live in with the suffix _RX, so I know that they've been through RX. I typically run the following on all audio in my batch process: phase, deplosive, EQ only to roll off low end, mouth declick, and depending on how the audio is sounding after the denoising, I might run vocal denoise or voice denoise just to clean it up a little bit more. Once batch process is done running, I'll open the new files in RX and do any additional work that might be needed. And this is where that mental list I made a couple steps ago comes into play. If everything was good, I'll just listen to the batch processed files, make sure nothing is out of the ordinary. If I do need to do any additional denoising, or any other kind of cleanup work, I'll do it right here. And once I'm done making any changes, if I have to make any changes, I'll save the file with the suffix to let me know what extra steps were taken. This is the end of the RX section, or the cleanup section of my process. Now we move into the DAW. Like I mentioned earlier, that's Hindenburg. Hindenburg auto levels everything for me, so I don't have to worry about leveling things right off the bat. So the first step I do once I hit Hindenburg is I cut out all of the sections where someone isn't talking. This ensures a cleaner, more professional sounding episode. To me, I find just cutting it out, I don't have to worry about gate settings. I don't have to worry about any of that. I just know it's going to be clean sounding when someone's not talking. Now that I've cut away all of the silent parts, I'll start setting up my rough mix. Each show has a template within Hindenburg, and I have a preset channel strip essentially set up for each track, and that includes Acon Digital Deverberate 3, Sonable Smart Gate, FabFilter Pro DS, Sonable Smart EQ, Sonable Smart Comp, and the Julian Loudness Meter. My master channel typically has the following installed: Universal Audio Fairchild 670, Universal Audio API 2500 bus compressor, Universal Audio Ampex ATR 102 tape emulation, Sonable Smart Limit, and the last is Julian Loudness Meter. One that I don't have listed but is typically in my master chain is SonarWorks, to help me when I'm setting up the mix and doing EQ work, to make sure that my headphones aren't biasing my decision making. And then I will always double check my mix on my monitors just to make sure that everything is sounding the way that it should. Now that I have my mix set up, I move on to the editing phase. During the editing phase, I'll make adjustments to the mix, or if I hear other issues that I missed during the cleanup phase, I'll bounce back to RX, make those changes, save the file, and reload it into Hindenburg. And when I'm finished with the editing, I'll double check the readings on the loudness meter to ensure that I'm close to my target of -16 LUFS. If I'm too far off, I'll tweak the limiter settings to get it closer to -16. Once I'm happy with the levels, I'll export the WAV file. And once the WAV file is done exporting, I'll drag that into RX for final conversion to MP3. All told, it takes me roughly 3 to 4 hours to take raw audio to a finished episode. But keep in mind, I've been doing this for about 20 years now. Maybe not podcasts, but working with audio in general. So don't let that get you down if you're spending more time on an episode than this. Speed comes with efficiency and experience. I have a video with Michael Jerry where he talks a little bit about finding his groove as an editor, and he talks about getting frustrated when he'd hear people talk about it only taking 3-4 hours to work on an episode, and he was spending more time than that. So check out that video. And back to what I mentioned about efficiency. One thing that has helped me a lot with efficiency is when I switched from the standard Apple Magic Mouse to the Logitech MX Master 3. It's a programmable mouse. It has 2 scroll wheels. So when I'm editing in Hindenburg, I can do about 70-80% of my editing straight from my mouse. I can scroll, I can zoom horizontally, I can cut, I can delete. I can do all of that without just from the mouse, because it has the 2 programmable buttons and the 2 scroll wheels. Having a horizontal scroll wheel makes it so nice when scrolling in a timeline, and that is one of the biggest things that I was looking for in a mouse, because the Magic Mouse, I could easily scroll horizontally and vertically, depending on which way I'm moving my finger. So that was a big thing I needed in a new mouse, and the MX Master 3 delivered that. But it's helped me so much in terms of speeding up my workflow. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did enjoy it, let me know by liking it and subscribing to the channel. If you know anybody who's editing podcasts and wanting to learn more about it, recommend the channel to them. I'd really appreciate it. I'll talk to you all next time.